one of the first things you mentioned about creativity was that your dad used to make stories off the cuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
was that your first experience with creativity, was your father?
Well, my parents both, I think I should give equal credit to. I mean, they were both very creative people in different ways. My mom was a teacher, was an art teacher specifically. Her grandfather had been a photographer and a teacher of photography, like that was his career. And so, having that sort of, I said I'm not a painter, but, having that sort of artistic eye and vision was always very important. And we got a lot of that from my mom's side. And yeah, my dad, it wasn't until much later in life that I discovered like sort of my dad's old high school yearbooks and found out, oh my gosh, he was like in more plays than I was in. But that wasn't really a part of his life when I was growing up. But yeah, no, very much a storyteller, a writer of stories, and still is. He has a website of his own, which I help him keep up. And he goes and gets hired to sort of go to different events and functions and tell live stories and
No kidding.
like that.
What is that website called?
That is PA Jack, like Pennsylvania Jack, but pajack.com. And he lives here about an hour away from us. So, is mostly doing local things, but but both my parents are huge history buffs. And my dad does a combination of stories that he writes, and then again just sort of interpreting sort of old folklore tales and things like that. So, but anyway, I guess all of that is to say that I feel like I lived in a house where we had very creative bugs, and reading and books and stories that could come out of that was a big part of me growing up.
So what would you say, yeah, if you look back, is there a particular thing that you remember as being your first worthwhile creative endeavor? Like for instance, what I was mentioning earlier when I was asking someone about this was, I think when I was like 7 or 8, my friend and I had a little tape recorder, and we pretended that we had our own radio show. I think that was one of the first
Nice.
real like lengthy creative projects that I did. Do you have like
Okay.
an equivalent of that?
Um, yeah, I mean, a couple of things I guess spring to mind. So, like in kindergarten, I was already reading and writing, and like a couple of times I can remember my teachers. I assume they just like didn't know what else to do with me. Like they had to like make up extra things for me to do. So I wrote a book when I was in kindergarten, and now it's not like a novel. It's like a book that a kindergartner would write, but still like it was something that was kind of very important to me at the time that I do this, and I sat down and I worked very hard and made that. And then in fourth grade, sort of a similar thing. Like I think my teacher was just like, get him out of here, like give him something to do. It was like, go write a play and we'll we'll put it on. And so I wrote a very silly play, which was basically like a parody of existing TV shows. This would have been 1984, and so it was very goofy. But my teacher like stuck to her word. We put this thing on, and people came and saw it. Apparently I don't remember that part so well, but so yeah, I don't know. The other thing was I have 3 cousins on my dad's side, and we wouldn't see them very often except on Easter and Thanksgiving. But again, somehow I convinced them all that was like an activity that we should do every Thanksgiving, that we should put on a play for our parents. And then when video cameras came along, and my parents actually had one, then it turned into making a film each Thanksgiving. Again, which were very goofy and silly, and parodies of existing things and things like that. But those were all very fun. And and I remember my parents' favorite part was that we always made them fill out a survey after each one, like a customer satisfaction survey. Like, how did you like the play? What did you like about the play? Is there anything that could be improved about the play? we were sort of very focused on this, like getting this affirmation, I think, from our audience of four people. It would have been my parents and my aunt and uncle. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, they all went along with it too. So I guess it wasn't a terrible experience. But yeah, so I mean, much like you and your microphone doing your radio show, we had a few things like that that I can remember from being a kid and a teenager.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have a bit of nature and nurture going on to have the creativity that you do. Like it's in your genes, perhaps, but you were certainly conditioned that way by your parents, right?
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. Yeah, like I said, I mean, everybody, well, not everybody, but I had a lot of people in my family that were very sort of artistically bent. So my grandmother um, she had a master's degree in scenic or in theater, and was probably the first person before me in my family to have a master's degree. But and then went on to to teach and do other things. And as I said, my grandfather, who I never got to know, but I'm told often by that side of the family that I am like, was a photographer all his life and very artistic. And so, yeah, so I mean, I think there's a little bit of that. And my sister, as well, majored in music and theater and works now sort of part-time for the same theater company that I mentioned in my bio in Philadelphia. So,
Are we allowed to say the name of that one or
oh
no?
yeah, sorry, the Arden Theater
Yeah,
Company, ardentheater.org. And
very prestigious.
it's a great place. I
Hmm.
miss it a lot. I wish I could get back there more often than I do.
I bet. I bet you missed that. It's with all the different art forms that you are involved in, and the ones that you started with being more of the theatrical. Um, would you say that you love a particular art form more than another, or is it just whatever you have the time and ability to get involved in is what you're passionate about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, as I put in my little bio for you, I also do, I consider myself a very musical person, and I don't get too many outlets for that anymore these days. But singing and piano in particular were always a big part of my growing up, and feel like they're part of my identity now. Music and theater both. But again, like not to beat a dead horse, but I feel like even in those art forms, the story of it is really important. I'm probably just not sophisticated enough to appreciate like a great symphony, but purely orchestral music that's that's not like Peter and the Wolf, where I know that there's a story being told. I don't have too much interest in that, or dance. That while respect the heck out of what dancers can do, that I certainly cannot. It needs to be, and dancers would probably tell me, well, there's always a story, whether you get it or not. But anything just sort of for the pure art of it that doesn't have some kind of narrative, I lose interest in very quickly. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I think, those two, live music and theater, are definitely the things that I like the most. But just purely visual art is just something. Oh, sorry, there's a kid interrupting. It's just not something that I know as much about or am as into. But can certainly
Now,
appreciate.
your parents, are they the ones responsible for all the different places that you've moved around, or is that strictly because of your passions and
Yeah,
following them?
no, that's more adult life. So I've lived in a couple different places as a kid. So my father worked for the Pennsylvania State Parks system. So he was the manager, they call superintendent, of several different state parks. So we did actually move around a bit. I went in one school district through ninth grade, and then we moved when I was in high school, and moved a couple other times, but that was all within Pennsylvania. So I went to college in Pennsylvania as well, but then afterwards got into graduate school in California, and that was my choice to go out to California and live out there. I was there for 5 years. And then after coming back for a little while, yeah, my first, quote, real job after school was all done was in the Washington, D.C. area. So yeah, those were all adult experiences living in these urban areas. but yeah, just moved around a bit, and we're just within Pennsylvania.
There's so much, so much culture you must have acquired by, just osmosis, I guess, just going through all these different places. First of all, I've never met anyone, I didn't even know this about your dad,
Okay.
who was raised by someone that took care of state parks and had to move around because of that. That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Oh
And
yeah.
and then going to where I moved to Pennsylvania from, Northern California, you went to Berkeley.
Right.
Berkeley, well, technically Oakland is my favorite part of that whole area,
Yeah.
because there's so many cultures converging and celebrating each other,
Absolutely.
and then being so close to a great university that it influences the culture even more. So you have your dad raising you in a very unique situation.
Yep.
You have the culture you acquired from Northern California, moving to the culture of DC.
Yep.
So would you say that you are like a cultural amalgamation, or or did you just pick up little bits here and there that you
Um,
liked?
yeah, I guess so. I don't know what kind of an accent do I have. I still have a like a sort of Western Pennsylvania accent.
I
So
don't notice you. I've never noticed you having an accent.
no, yeah. Well, everybody thinks they don't have an accent, but it's actually I listened to tapes of myself once as a very little kid, and yeah, I had a stronger like Pittsburgh accent because we lived closer to Pittsburgh when I was really little. But anyway, yeah, I mean a little bit, I guess. I mean, again, being sort of an adult. Or mostly an adult when living in San Francisco and DC, it's maybe not quite the same as if I'd been, what they call like army brat moving around, as a kid. But I would hope that any time you're living in a different place with a different mix of people and different experiences, that does help and shape and give you empathy, maybe and little perspective. So I would certainly hope that, that is rubbed off on me. And yeah, I mean, Northern California was really wonderful. So my wife was born and raised, well, not born and raised in Northern California. So that was really, her stomping grounds, her environment, and that's good for us because it means we get to go back and visit relatives and things like that from time to time. I always say now, now that I have a family and kids to raise and a place to live, that living here in the middle of Pennsylvania is a lot more affordable than living in Northern California, and also just less crowded and less stressful in general. Spent a lot more time in the car when we lived in Northern
Oh
California.
my God, yeah, California is all about driving,
Yeah,
and driving by yourself if you don't
yeah,
have to have somebody in the car with you.
yeah, that's right. But it was a wonderful place, as a grad student. So I would have been 25 when I moved out there. No, that doesn't sound right. I must have been younger than that. But anyway, 23, I guess. But anyway, yeah. So to spend, like I said, 5 years out there in my 20s was just a great place. And then DC as well. Like not only I mean, obviously DC is sort of not governed by, but affected very much by the federal government, workforce, which is huge. And so not only did I live in DC, but I worked for the Federal Food and Drug Administration. And again, I think that's a place where you get a lot of diversity, a lot of people with, well, scientific backgrounds, but very different scientific backgrounds, and medical backgrounds and legal backgrounds and things like that. And it really is, a place that attracts smart people and people who want to sort of serve their country in a different, non-military kind of way, from lots of places. And so I feel like that was also a really good experience and a good, place to be and interacting with those kind of folks for quite a while. So yeah, I don't know. I hopefully, and now I'm back in Pennsylvania, which is not, I didn't grow up in this area of Pennsylvania, but I'm back in my home state, and you would think that I would, sort of collect those experiences and those perspectives from other places and bring them back and try to influence people here with them. But I don't know how well I'm doing at that.
Well, I think only the people in your life could probably um, affirm that, or
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but well, first of all, because you lived in DC, are you like people from Baltimore where they don't want to be considered part of the DMV? Are you familiar
Uh,
with that acronym, DMV?
the DMV, the driver.
No, no, it's a although that is what they call it in most places.
Yeah.
It's the DC, Maryland, Virginia area
Oh, okay.
because and I think it's more of a um, more of an actor acronym than anything else
Okay.
because you've got a little tiny little pool of people that create short films in
Yeah.
Baltimore, and there's some TV shows there.
Oh, sure.
But it's easier to pool the whole area together because Richmond has great theater, DC's
Yeah.
got some theater, some
Yeah.
XYZ. So yeah, so DMV. Sorry if you hadn't heard of that, I
I
guess,
didn't
but
know about that. No, wasn't a term that we use. But yeah, I mean, th- I often, you get called on it by people who actually do live in Washington D.C. You say, "Oh yeah, I lived in Washington D.C.," and they're like, "Yeah, right, where?" And they're like, "Oh well, actually, I lived in Maryland, but it was close." So I think there's a certain amount of credibility to the folks that actually live, and I have friends who actually live in the district. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you've got three different airports there. It very much is sort of an area that it feels like a combination of multiple areas, and there are slightly different, feels to whether you're in Northern Virginia versus whether you're in the city or the district versus on the Maryland side of things. And Baltimore does feel like it's a little bit more removed from that. But yeah, no, so yeah, we were definitely, on the border. We could ride the metro. I could walk to the metro from my apartment and take it into DC proper. So definitely felt like I was connected to DC. But Baltimore is another place that I never lived there, but spent a lot of time there at Johns Hopkins Hospital and as a patient, not as a worker. And it's an area that's changed a lot over the years and over our lifetime. But I like that city a lot too, and I like their airport a lot too. Living, as you know, as we do here in a place that has no big airport, Baltimore is often my go-to airport.
well, I would venture you probably utilized airports with your profession more than I have. Even the 13 years in California, flying back for the holidays, I'm sure you have to fly all the time.
Yeah, more than I would kind of like. I like flying. I don't like airlines. That's the trouble, but you can't really have one or the without the other, unless I, suddenly hit the jackpot and buy my own helicopter or something like that. Flying cars, they're coming, right?
They should be. They're
Uh,
20 years late, but
but yeah, yeah, definitely. The first time I never flew on a plane until I was 18. Like that was my first flight. I had a camp experience up in like upstate New York, and for whatever reason, it seems like we could have driven there, but I took a plane from Philadelphia to Syracuse, and that was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. And yeah, through the whole. I mean, I didn't come back too often when I lived in California, but Christmas and once in the summer, things like that. And so I was very much a Southwest Airlines kind of guy, getting those cheapest flights you possibly could and making four stops between here and there and things like that. I still do that sometimes, but not quite as often as I used to. But yeah, I mean, with Geisinger, I mean, I try to keep it, yeah, not too crazy. But the nature of the work is you want to go to meetings and conferences with other people that are doing the same kind of scientific work that you're doing, and that usually means 2 or 3 times a year going different places. But it's my wife teaches at Bucknell, and it's similar for her because they have particular conferences that they like to take students to network and present their work and things like that. So she's probably still traveling more and flying more than I am, but between the two of us, yeah, we kind of
is is her job at Bucknell the reason that you moved to Pennsylvania?
yep.
So
Uh,
what was your plan like as Jove
yeah,
career wise?
that's a good question. Well, so we were both living in DC. We moved there when we were still we each moved there. Guess I should say while we were still dating, and we got married while we lived in that area. And I had my job at the FDA, which could have been a permanent job. I was very happy with it. But she had a more like a fellowship type position, or what they call postdoc position at the Naval Research Lab in the southeast corner of DC. And so it was not really a permanent thing. I mean, they liked her, as I do, and they, I'm sure, gladly would have hired her on full time. But the particular job she was in was not meant to be a permanent kind of thing. And as she was getting near the end of that, she was saying, well, I like it here well enough, I like the people well enough, but I really want to be a teacher, and I really want to teach. So she started interviewing a couple different schools in different places. And when she got sort of heard back from Bucknell to say, yeah, we're interested in you, can you come up for an interview? That was one of one of the early questions. I don't know if it was her first question, but one of her early questions, thankfully, was, well, I have this husband, and I'm not sure what he's going to do if I bring him.
It's like a condition. I have this
Yeah,
husband situation.
I got this whole like thing. Well, so we call that the two-body problem. I don't know if that's related outside the teaching or science community, but two-body problem. So yeah, what's he gonna do? And right off the bat, they were like, "Oh, well, Geisinger," and we both said, "What?" Because we didn't know what Geisinger was, and I don't know if all your listeners know what Geisinger is either, but it's a fairly large health system here in central and northeastern Pennsylvania. And so they said, well, if he's a biomedical type person that's working for the FDA, I'm sure they would give him a job there at Geisinger. And so the next time that she was supposed to come up for a visit and interview, they made some connections over at Geisinger, and I talked to some people there, and how these things happen. Strangely, like the main people that I was there to talk to was not a particularly good fit, and they were not going to offer me a job. But by the process of being there, sort of made connections with other people that worked in other parts of Geisinger. And so when we'd returned home, actually, to Maryland, got a phone call from one of them saying, "Hey, sorry I missed you, but I saw your resume, and this sounds like I'd like to talk to you more about a possible job here." So it was anyway. It was a leap of faith in that Donna had to let Bucknell know, and so she said yes. And we talked about the fact that we figure it out. I remember doing those calculations about, well, what kind of how long can we make it if you have a job and I don't have a job, and all the things. But then it worked out within by the end of the year I also had a job in this area as well. So it was not luck, but it worked out for the best.
Mm. So one of the other collective perspective members is trying to join us. She's got no video, no audio, so I'm guessing she's trying to listen while she takes care of her child or does what she needs to do.
Well, hello.
Hi there, exactly right.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
I was going to ask your question for you, Celine, and I can definitely do so, or you can do it yourself, but there was some things that different people from the show wanted to know about different artists. And the one that Celine was really curious about was whether or not you have children, which you do, because Celine is a professional drummer freelancing in Calgary, and she's now a wife and a mother. So there she is.
Hi.
So Celine, this is Jove, and Jove, this is
Nice
Celine.
to meet you, Jove.
Nice to meet you too.
She has a pretty full background on you based on what I forwarded to her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my curiosity is always on balance, because that's a question that is quite often the challenge, is how do you balance all the different facets of your life? And especially now that we're in this situation where people can't leave home, and we can no longer ignore the fact that there needs to be childcare and there needs to be somebody there all of the time, helping facilitate those lives. I'm just curious, how has this shifted, or has it shifted in responsibilities for yourself and your partner at home? How have things shifted, and how are they now?
No, it's definitely shifted, and I'll preface all this by saying, like, we're doing okay, and I realize that there are people out there really struggling with this new shift here. But yes, so my wife and I both work and are now expected to work from home during this crisis. And we have two kids that would be in middle school and elementary school right now. And, for the first week or two, thought maybe this was just a temporary thing and, sort of, well, just let's not worry about, as long as they're having fun and not burning the house down, it'll be fine. But then as this has gone longer and longer, and now they have assignments being sent home from teachers and work that they're supposed to get done as well. And the two of us are really, it's challenging for us to be there looking over their shoulder all day long. It's been hard. I mean, I think and I'm sure you're finding this as well. Like we were talking earlier in the hour with Isaac that I used to have a commute. I used to have sort of a separation of, okay, I'm home. I will make, I make breakfast for the kids. I do that kind of stuff, get them on the school bus for the day. But then I have sort of a half-hour transition where I go into work mode, and then I'm at work and I'm doing that work, and then I have about a half hour coming back. And I think, I assume I'm not the only one that it's been hard for, is the blurring of that boundary, where I'm sort of always now thinking about work and thinking about what the kids are doing at the same time, because we had a slight interruption here, but that's what all day is like. Even though my wife and I have sort of rearranged things a bit. In the beginning of the shutdown, I was just trying to get all my work done downstairs at the dining room table, and that was not working very well. So we have a room now where we both kind of shut ourselves in here. That still doesn't. It's not like the door's locked. I mean, I think it, really shines a light on, not only the fact that our health insurance is tied to our jobs, which is a very hard thing for people, but also, the sort of childcare and what do you do when the kids can't go to school, and what do you do with them all day? So, I'll be the first to admit our kids are watching more TV than they normally would, and they're, playing more video games than they normally would. And I think the best that we can do is try to, not try to recreate the 8-hour school day for them at all, or not even close, but, to at least try to inject some variety and, try to make them go outside and play and try to make them spend at least a little time, reading a book or doing something that's enrichment. And I don't know how other people are doing it, but that's about the best we feel like we can manage. How old are you said you are a mother. How old are your kids?
I have a 4-year-old, and I like to call her a tornado because she goes from
Nice.
0 to what the heck happened really quick.
Right,
And
right.
that's the challenge, right? Is how do you balance that? And so I'm sorry I missed the beginning, and I didn't hear if you had already spoken about, because you have so many different facets of yourself. You're sort of like all of these different entities in a way. Your creativity, are you able to be creative in this time and space, or is that something that has to be left aside so that you can do your professional work?
I mean, no, a little bit. I mean, we certainly are trying to. I was saying earlier to Isaac that I still have this sort of duty each night to read to the kids and usually make up a story off the top of my head. So it's a good exercise. Sometimes I am literally just too tired to do that, but other times, I feel like it's stretching that stretching that muscle to make sure you'll be able to do that. No, early on, I think as it's dragged on, it's just gotten fatiguing. So early on, we even made a video in the one weekend. We were talking about the movie Tangled and Disney movies, and so I made my kids do like a little music video, and that was wonderful fun. I think I enjoyed it more than they did, but we really worked on that. And thankfully, both my kids love to draw and love to build Lego, and I love to do those things too. And so I think part of it is the sort of the boundary things of we've sort of started making a schedule for them during the day while we're off work to say, okay, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, I want you to do this. From 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, I want you to do that. But I wish I had those blocks in my day as well. My day seems to just kind of get work done, and then it's time to eat dinner and and get kids to bed and things like that. But so a little bit, I'm very active with the theater company, which is sort of mostly shuttered right now. But we're still, trying to kind of wait and see what's going on this summer. So I'm actually, have been, fortunate enough, even if the show doesn't actually end up happening, to be still working with my creative team there and sort of planning and prepping a musical. So at least I get to, use part of my brain to get that ready. And hopefully that will happen. But yeah, my literally just in the last week, my son has been fixated on this idea that we should write a book, or actually that I should write a book. He said, "Dad, write a book." I said, "Well, I would love to do that. I don't know when I'm going to do that." He's like, "You should do it he's 9. You should do it in the summer when you have a lot more free time." I'm like, "You're the one who doesn't go to school in the summer and has more free time. So I think you should write a book."
Your son's like, "Dad, you've been on Jeopardy. You can write a book."
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think, I couldn't do the theater that I do without my wife, who's, willing to sort of not be going to rehearsals when I'm going to rehearsals during those periods of time. So I think, it is not that it's not doable, obviously, but, but it helps. And I couldn't do what I do without the sort of support at home. And these times when, when theater is a big outlet for me, to not be able to do that, it's definitely hard, but people have bigger things to worry about.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, there was quite a bit we talked about, Celine, that I know you would have found interesting. You'll get to hear it later, but
I will.
yeah. But it is fascinating. Like I'm really glad that you're a part of the show specifically just because of these artist interviews, because those are questions, because I'm a Peter Pan, I wouldn't have asked. And but it is really true. I mean, I admire so much anybody who does what they love for a living, because doing it is not easy. And I've never worked so hard at anything in my life as being a professional actor. And you are, as everybody's already heard, but I mean, you are doing so many things that demand so much time and affect so many people aside from being a father. I mean, wow. Like, yeah, I'm in awe of parents who can also make life happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of it is, you're trying to set a good example for those kids, right? You're trying to say these are the things that are important to me, and you hope that rubs off, and that they, think that those things are important too. Not that they shouldn't have their own choices, but obviously, if you love something enough, that you would hope that your kids would do that as well. But yeah, it's the other, that I don't stop and look around very often to realize it, but the theater company that, given it's a pretty small community theater company, but we do, we touch a lot of lives, and we touch a lot of, people that are then in the process of making that theater with us, but then also the people that, come and see it. Not that they couldn't go see theater other places as well, but sometimes it's easy to forget that there's that aspect of it, that you're a lot of times you're focused on the product that you're doing, because you want to do it, but that hopefully you really are, making some other people's lives, even if it's just for those 2 hours or whatever, more enjoyable as well. And I think as we grow and we evolve as a group, we realize that more and more, more people have the opportunity to come up to us and say that thing that, look, we want you to know how much this means and how much we enjoy not only the things that you do, but even just the idea that you exist, and that your little town here that doesn't have an airport, as we were talking about earlier, has this artistic outlet for people to do things. And yeah, I mean, you want to just keep that going for as long as you can, and obviously nobody can do everything, and nobody can do it forever, but you try to do what you can with the time that you have.
To some degree, I guess we're all in our own number of bubbles. So being in an actor in New York, there's a certain bubble, and then with this show, there's a bunch of intellectually and artistically minded friends that have a little bubble. but the three of us are all, performers. And so our bubble is very much reinforced by the same people that are doing what we do, or at least can empathize with it.
Yeah, that's true.
But you are community organizing and to make that community theater happen. And I wonder, and this goes for you too, Celine, really, but the only feedback I really get to know, is what I am doing mattering? Has it affected anybody? Is by me, it's because of reviews I'm getting, or the audiences that wait for me to come out after the show, because that's happened. And that's great, but like, it's also not what I'm talking about. That's just egoic reinforcement. And, have you had anybody from the community come to you and say anything more than like, great job with that, directing that show, or great job acting in that show? Has anyone said like, thank you so much for bringing this to the community? I'm not an actor, I'm not a performer, but man, I'd have to drive an hour to see anything at all if not for you.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, part of that comes from, so, we are a nonprofit registered organization, and we have bills to pay. And so there is, in addition to the fundraising side of things, there's definitely a financial side of just trying to keep the theater going. And we've been so blessed, if I can use that word, and fortunate that we do have, quite a few people and more people year over year that choose to support us in that way as well, not just buy a ticket to the show, but also donate to the organization. And so we definitely hear it, from those folks, and I'm sure others feel the same way. I don't, tie it just to the financial aspect, but no, absolutely, people that say, thank you, we really want to support this organization and make it, keep continuing, because this is important to us, not just this performance, that performance. So, I'm fortunate to be able to see that side of the group, which gives you some of that affirmation. As a performer myself, I guess one of the things that comes to mind is one of the very first shows that we did as RiverStage was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I played one of the brothers who has one song in that show, but afterwards, got a contact from somebody that works at Geisinger, not really somebody that I even work with, but a doctor who, like you were saying, is not a theater person, not a performer themselves at all. But they wrote to me and said that was possibly the most powerful song performance I've seen that I can remember. Like, that was amazing. And I didn't know this person at all, and I was certainly happy with how I had done, but I was not expecting anybody to make a comment quite like that. So so I mean, both sides I get to see a little bit in helping the group thrive, but it always feels good, as a person when you hear that. But as somebody who's trying to make theater happen beyond what I'm doing myself, it feels so much better to know that the mission and the organization as a whole is eliciting that kind of reaction.
We have roughly 2 minutes left. So, Celine, did you have any last things you wanted to ask him?
I guess if you're working a lot with the community theater aspect, are you able to look, now that this entire COVID situation has happened, are you able to now sort of try to navigate a new type of scheduling in theater? Do you think that's in the future? Because I know a lot of theaters do like 10 of 12s and those kinds of technical long shots, or do you think it's just going to be going back to the same, or do you think there's going to be a shift?
That's a real good question. I don't know. I'm not, but I think there's something that I mean, I think there's a reason we have sort of different media in there, as the pre-recorded and then the live performance. And I hope and think that the live performance of needing to be in a space and sharing a space close up with actors is not something that people are ever going to want to shift away from completely. we are thinking now, of course, what we're going to be doing a year from now, because that's the way, theater groups work. And, it breaks my heart to have to sort of put that caveat into all my emails saying, well, I don't know if this thing is going to happen again a year from now. Like once winter rolls around again, are we going to have another flu pandemic? And because our February show went on as scheduled, but we were supposed to have a show last month, and we're supposed to have a show next month, which we're still waiting to see about. So I don't know. I mean, I certainly look up to and respect the sort of larger companies that are sort of exploring that and trying more things. We're small enough that I don't think we are really capable of shifting our model too completely. And if we go transition to a world where we just can't have a large group of people together to do a show every other month, then I think most of us are going to need to find other outlets as well. But yeah, I don't know. We'll wait and see. I'm certainly hoping that there's the normalcy or near normalcy that comes back around eventually, because I think most of us that got into this just love that up close and personal aspect of it, and don't want that to go away. I don't know.
Well, so for whatever reason, it's letting me record longer than I was supposed to have been able to record. But they did tell me they were increasing the amount of time I could record by 10 minutes, but this is longer than that. So,
okay.
But you still are a person with many hats, so I need to let you go do at least one or two of those hats.
Go make sure my children are in their beds, not running around pantsless.
Right.
The big sigh moment.
Yeah. That's right.
But Jove, I love you, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you for having me on. This was a good, like I said, even if it's just an excuse to talk to you, which I don't get to do much anymore, I really am grateful for that.
Good. Well, give your little ones a big, crazy kiss and hug and say it's from the crazy guy.
I definitely will. And they will know who I mean.